All right, hello everyone, and welcome back for episode 77 of our linear reread through A Song of Ice and Fire. My name is Adam, also known as drownedsnow in the forums. I will be your host, and I am joined by James.
Hello. Hi.
Matt.
Varley on the forums.
And Hannah.
Hey, Shadowbaby on the forums.
Today we will be covering 3 chapters from 2 books. We will be covering Jon 5 from A Dance with Dragons, Tyrion 5 from A Dance with Dragons, which is a few chapters before that, and going all the way back to A Feast for Crows with the 3rd Sam chapter. Last week, let's see, where did we leave off? Well, not last week, but last episode. Let's see, I believe Nymeria and crew, they covered Sansa's 2nd chapter, Brienne's 4th chapter from A Feast for Crows, and then the 3rd chapter of Bran and A Dance with Dragons. So all of these events right here will be taking place late March, early April of 300. So our first chapter is Jon 5 from A Dance with Dragons, and I believe James has that for us.
All right. Yes, Jon 5. So Jon wakes up at his work table after studying for finals all night. He's like, someone has to organize that library because that shit is in shambles. Maybe Sam can do it after studying at the Citadel for a couple years. None of the other stewards can read, and he sent the only useful person away with a dying old man, a product of incest, and a prince that is not a prince. Very smart. Jon realizes that he barely touched his dinner from last night, even though this whole chapter is about not being able to provide food for everyone. Plus, Ed filled his trencher to the brim to soften the stale bread that he didn't eat. Jon, being our noble hero, decides not to move into the King's Tower, which he could have to make more room for his men. No wonder why they hate him. He has a perfectly good place to settle in and make room for people, but he leaves it vacant for a king that may never return. Today, Jon and some of his men are going to Mole's Town to give the wildlings that settled there some food. On the way, Jon sees several trees with faces freshly carved into them. Jon realizes that the wildlings may have said they will abandon their old gods for the Lord of Light, but they lied. He tells Ed to make sure the Red Priestess doesn't find out about any of the newly carved trees. Trying to make light of the situation, Jon tells Ed that one of the trees bears his likeness. Ed just hopes that he doesn't have the same fate as the tree, to die, burning, with leaves up his nose. Mole's Town has been put to the torch by the same people that are now residing in it. It is a cesspool of stinky wildlings. Jon and his men offer what little food they can spare, but damn greedy wildlings have to start some shit. Come on. One rotting apple isn't enough. Maybe Jon should have brought the dinner from last night that he didn't eat. The wildlings are desperate at this point, and many have decided that it would be better to serve the Night's Watch rather than die in a stinky frozen hole. Jon offers a place at Castle Black for any boy over the age of 12 and girls over 16, but after being put in his place by a little feminist, he changes the age of 12 to both sexes. He gets 63 wildlings to come back to Castle Black with him. Let's just say Bowen Marsh isn't too happy about this. Jon just gave him 63 more reasons to stab him in the belly. The end.
Nice.
All right, so there you have it. There's a lot of complaint about the stink of the wildlings, and they're like, well, you just got to get over that shit. You'd probably be stinky too. So, yeah, and it is funny that he's like, well, boys at 12, because in the 7 Kingdoms, like, you're a man grown at 12 and you can be a squire and all that, but girls, you got to be 16. And they're like, well, we want to eat too, so can younger girls like work on the wall? Oh, well, yeah, I guess wildlings are probably different than girls south of the wall, so sure. Why not? Equality.
Yeah, why does this watch suddenly have standards? Like, weren't like Lamy and Hot Pie on the way to the How old were they?
Right. They were boys. I mean, they were young.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Hot Pie is, not much older than Arya, right?
Right.
And Arya is like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. I don't know. This is a brutal chapter where you got to choose either an apple or an onion. Obviously the apple, but then people trying to scam apples, claiming they got kids at home. No one believes that. Bring your kid, woman.
Yeah, bring your damn kid.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I never really thought of it before, but yeah, he's like, well, I'm not going to move into the King's Tower, and you're like, oh, they kind of need beds, so that does kind of. Yeah.
Right, yeah, he's just leaving a vacant tower, probably the nicest one at Castle Black.
You can fit like
for a guy
20
that's
people in
never
there,
come
dude.
back. Right.
If the king comes, you can kick him out, but.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine
Yeah.
how happy Bowen Marsh would be to move into the King's Tower? He may not have stabbed John in the belly. If that
I don't
was...
think Bowen Marsh will ever be happy. I think the Bridge of Skulls did something to him. He changed.
One too many concussions.
He's not the jolly pomegranate or whatever the fuck he is.
Whoa.
Yeah, I heard jolly.
I'm keeping that in.
That was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, I do find it funny. Is it the Then or whatever who's like, yeah, screw you guys, like, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the Then are the only one with proper armor and, good fighting skills, and they're like, yeah, fuck you guys.
So you were gonna help
going
you?
back to
No
our
way.
sticky
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah. Like we got what we wanted, sort of, except we need food.
So, that like when they're going down to the wildlings, like oak trees have like angry faces on them.
No. Just like see right there, you sounded fine. So I don't know what's causing it. Just go slower, maybe.
It sounds
I noticed that the oak trees had mean faces carved into them. What does that mean? They just can carve a face in anything?
Yeah. Mean faces in the oak trees. Yeah.
People think I'm slow because I'm Canada, eh? No, just that they're carving faces into like any old trees. Yeah, so I mean, but for the religion, the old gods I thought dwelled in the werewoods. Like, can they just go into any tree, and can Bran see out of the new faces?
Yeah, these people don't have strict rules. They're just like, it's a tree. We'll make do. I don't know if it's gonna. The werewood probably has to be the conduit if there's some sort of magic. But for them, they're just like, just start carving faces. Like,
All willy nilly.
yeah. Any port in a storm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the faces that they carved out, I don't think Bran will be able to see through them just because they're not werewoods. I think it has to do completely with the werewoods.
Interesting. So what would you all choose, an apple or an onion?
An apple.
Obviously. Well, unless I had meat, maybe I could like use the onion with that, but otherwise the apple for sure.
Yeah, the apple only really works with like pork. Like onion can go with whatever.
Yeah, and they
But
already
by
ate
itself,
all the pigs.
I don't know.
Hey, you make French onion soup, you get a little broth of that onion, throw a slab like provolone on there, tasty shit. You can't make an apple soup.
I've heard like there are some onions that are so good, you just eat them like apples, but I've never come across that.
That is disgusting to me.
Too.
Yeah.
Do we have a history of? I'm like, this is probably just me like brain farting, but is there a history of them carving the wildlings carving faces into the werewoods north of the wall? Like, are they the ones that do that? Or are most of those like they've just been around forever and
I think
ever?
they're already there.
Right?
Yeah, I think the werewoods were probably carved, hundreds, thousands of years
by
ago.
the children, so
By
there
the
could
children,
be some sort of magic in them. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think anything that's been carved into a not werewood tree, that was probably done by, a human couple 100,000 years after the children disappeared. So.
Well,
Interesting.
John says, like, of course they bring their gods south with them. So, like, in this case, I figure it's probably some simpleton or, like, a parent trying to convince their children. If you use the werewoods as something to, like, keep your children in line, and then all of a sudden you migrate to somewhere that doesn't have them, you might fashion one up and be like, see, they're still watching you. Shit like that,
I thought grumpkins and snarks were the threats.
Yes, Scrumpkins and Snarks.
Well, I mean, if you use like religion to keep your kids in line, like don't do that because Jesus will see you doing that.
Jesus has seen some shit.
So what is what werewoods are the furthest south? That's what I'm trying to look up right now. But because we know like there's the one in Winterfell there, but like I thought that there were, or at least there used to be ones further south. Would those have
Like,
also
Erie
been
has one, right?
done by the children?
Aren't there one in Raventree, Blackstones, and the
Yeah, that sounds right.
somewhere in the Riverlands?
Well, yeah, I mean, doesn't the Erie have one too?
I think they have a Godswood, but I don't know if it has a heart
The
tree.
ear is also so small too. Yeah.
I think they make it a point to say like the soil was too like little to support a weirwood.
Yeah, so I think they may have like a face carved into, like an oak tree up there or something. I know they have a Godswood though. Yeah, you got to imagine when Ned was fostered up there, he had to have somewhere to pray.
That there were a lot more further south that were, at one point, and then they were destroyed. But it does say that the free folk do carve into the weirwood trees sometimes. So.
Yeah. So I have a question. This kind of should have been brought up on the last podcast, Bran's one, but now that we're talking about heart trees, do you think because Bran can kind of look back in time through the trees, do you think he could look through trees that have been cut down? Or you think once they were cut down or burned, it lost all of its memories?
I don't know.
Oh, like because it's like it's offline. It's not connected anymore. But do you think like the weirwood net keeps those memories? I feel like it would if it's like one big if it's one big entity, if they're like connected through the soil sort of thing. You would think
he just gets a 404 file not found.
Right. It's like the camera's turned off, but the hard drive back at the home base still has everything up until it was cut down.
Here's something interesting. It says that the Red Keep has a Godswood, but instead of having a weirwood, its heart tree is made from a great oak. So maybe there is something to that.
The oak tree?
Well, yeah, like of all the trees that they chose to carve faces in, like pines and whatever the fuck else is in the north, they did it in oak, which there's a existing precedent for at least having a heart tree being oak.
Yeah, or maybe that's just like one of the larger kind of trees, because I think when they pick a heart tree, I would imagine that it's like the most predominant tree in that forest at that time. So maybe it's just oak trees grow faster and sturdier than other ones. And that's why they picked it. I don't know.
It says White Harbor has a weirwood in its Godswood. The Whispers has one. Raventree Hall. Storm's End was the southernmost, but Stannis burned the weirwood.
Bastard.
Yeah, of course he did. Asshole.
Classic Stannis.
Stannis is a fun sponge. He just sucks up all the fun. He's an asshole.
He's a sponge. Okay. So.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a fairly straightforward chapter, I think, but the most important thing here is kind of Jon setting up the fact that they are undermanned, they can't feed all these people, and he lets them know that it's either you fight with us or you fight alone, and like I will help you as much as I can, but I have to make sure that the defense comes first. So, which is going to cause some issues later on. But he's I don't know. Jon, obviously leading up to the crazy stabbing by all of his brothers, he's doing like the right thing and the wrong thing like at the same time a bunch. So, he also doesn't have a lot of good options.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people's argument for Jon throughout this book is that he didn't have another choice, so he had to make all the decisions that he had to make. But I think, moving into the King's Tower, things that would just like make his guys a little bit happy and resent him a little bit less, he could have tried to do. I mean, how quickly could they get out of there before, if Stannis did come back to the wall, how quickly could they get all that men out of that tower? I'd imagine pretty quickly.
Yeah, there are definitely some things that he doesn't do out of stubbornness that really would help his cause, and he goes, well, no, I can't do that. And you're like, you're throwing other traditions and kind of rules to the wind, and then he maintains other ones that really hurt him. So, and I mean, that's probably, he's one of the more qualified men at the wall, you would think, for this position, but he's also very young. So
do you really think so? I think like in a martial sense he is, but like in day-to-day leadership he's really
well,
shit.
that's what I'm saying, is that like as far as he's smarter than most of them. He's capable. He has better training, but he's just not there with experience. That's the main thing. But I mean, the other options weren't exactly great either. And to me, the main qualifier for the current Lord Commander is that like they need to believe that the primary threat is coming from the wall and want to do something about it. So I think he was probably the best in that sense.
Yeah, I think John would be much more suited to, command an army rather than, govern people.
Yeah, he would have probably been a better, like first ranger or something.
Yeah.
But that's unfortunately not really an option at this point. So Lord Commander Slint would have been interesting.
Ugh.
All right, so now we're all going south. We've just got to go south and abandon the wall.
I had one thing I wanted to say about this chapter. When I was reading it, I just realized like I have never been in a situation where like I've been poor and broke, but I've never had to ration anything. Like, have any of you? Can you imagine what that's like?
No.
Yeah. Or like, like how in England after World War II, years later, they were still rationing shit like milk and stuff.
Right. I tried rationing cigarettes one time and failed miserably.
It just makes me think like, fuck, I mean, and that woman is getting screwed if her apples, like, somebody gets like some Red Delicious and then you get like a little rotten crab apple. How's that fair?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but like they don't have time for fare, and like they just have to try to get everyone something and keep going.
But I mean, I think that like goes to show that John is a good commander because obviously he's sympathetic, but he's like, I can't give you another one. Then everyone is going to ask for another one, regardless of their needs.
Yeah.
So what was the Wildlings plan anyway? They wanted to get south of the wall, but yet brought 0 provisions. I thought that's what was slowing them down. Was like they're bringing oats and shit.
Well, I think
they lost a lot of that.
Yeah, and I don't think that they have a lot of provisions up there anyway. I mean, the people that live in the far north eat each other. Like it's alive up there, and the people.
Right. And how much longer did it take them to get past the wall? After Stannis attacks and all that. Then they're on the run and they're running through provisions and they're being so.
But
I think too, like if you think about how much they're trying to ration at all these castles for the oncoming winter, and how many years of storing that they're having to do of harvesting and things, and that's just for a castle, and you're talking about like a whole population of an entire nation, basically.
But I'm saying
that much to begin with.
I'm saying that like originally, if all had gone to plan, they're basically on the same timeline as they would be if they won the battle and like marched past it, right? But just that it was poor planning.
So I think the issue is just get to safety, get past the wall, and figure it out later. And also, it's like they don't know. Like it's always kind of cold and shitty up there, and they know that it's warmer and nice down south. They don't know about the wars that have ravaged the crops and all that.
But
they just want to get as far south as they can. And if winter was still like another year or two away, this would be fine. They would have time to plant crops, and they could work the gift and all that. But it's just too late.
Well, I think the bigger issue is that they got stopped at the wall and were fucking decimated. I think their plan was to get up over the wall and start running that bitch. Their plan was to pillage their way.
Well, you don't think they were going to stay at the wall? Like they were just going to push as far south and spread out. I think was their idea, right?
Yeah.
But that's also because they don't know anything of the Lords, like south of the north. They don't have any idea what's down there. They don't know what kind of obstacles and what challenges moving that amount of people through the land would come up across.
In the chapter, he says that for every 3 women, there was 1 man, because a bunch of them got wiped out. They would have, their ideal plan, had it all gone to plan, they would have had all these men and they would just be raping and pillaging, like Ironborn, just sweeping through, taking what they want. I think that was their plan, and it got stopped at the wall.
No, I know, but I'm just pointing out that it's not a very good plan because they're not well armed.
Oh, no,
and
fuck no.
Their numbers aren't large enough. Like once they started getting south, like the Southern Lords would have destroyed.
Oh yeah.
them. They don't realize that. So like if their plan had been to stay in the north somewhere, maybe I don't know.
Like Egret thinks that mill is like a castle. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
Right.
Their expectations are.
I think the also like the fact that their army and their people kind of broke up after Stannis's attack. I'm sure some of the provisions that they did have stored, people just grabbed what they could and ran. So anything that they may have left over, the people that actually ran from the battle probably took a bunch of shit too.
Well, and it doesn't sound like they had that much to begin with either. Like in Varamir's chapter in the beginning of Dance, the prologue, he's talking about how when Stannis came upon them, there's like fleeing. It was chaos, but in that chaos, like there's some line about how somebody stabbed somebody over a coat or like a loaf of bread or some shit. You know what I mean? Like if you have an army descending on you and your first thing is to like grab your life and go, and you're like sitting there getting stabbed over a coat or something, it doesn't sound like you had much to begin with either. Which obviously is why they're coming, right?
I think like a large store they would be able to ration off, and kind of make it last. But in the chaos, people probably took more than their ration and just ran. So people like Varamir were left with nothing. I think it was probably just chaos, and everybody just ripped at what they could and then dispersed. And then the people that stayed at the wall were the people, the weak ones and people that couldn't fight. I think that's part of the 3 women for every man that were left under the wall with no provisions.
Yeah, they probably assumed there'd be more wildlife south of the wall too. Like if you've only ever heard about what's on the other side of some wall, and you're being told it's going to be great over there, you're probably assuming it's like
like the grass is always greener on the other side of the wall.
Literally.
Land of milk and honey. Well, like they don't know what green grass is north of the wall, right?
Right.
They dig down. They're like, "There's dirt." I don't know what you're talking about.
But you can imagine, right? Somebody if you've ever seen a tree that even had like pine cone on it, and somebody like Mance tells you, so down below the wall, there's trees like this. Only they have crap growing on them you can eat, and they're everywhere.
They have plenty of food. Doesn't like Craster have like an orchard, and like they make their own wine and ale and stuff and mead. So
he has plenty of food for his like 50 people, right?
But also Craster is pretty close to the wall compared to where a lot of the other wildlings are coming from.
South.
Yeah, he's pretty far south where it's probably easier to grow.
And what has the wildling diet mostly been? Like hunting game, I guess.
Gotta be, right? Gotta be all meat.
Yeah, I was going to say mostly meat. I doubt they have that many.
Well, okay, because Craster is in that forest, right? So it's obviously not cold enough and not a high enough altitude for nothing to grow. But, okay, so like speaking of alive, right? They were at 11,000 feet in the Andes where it's like perpetual winter up there and nothing lives.
Potatoes do.
Yeah, potatoes.
Not in Westeros, Matt. Not in Westeros. We need to move on to the next chapter in just a second here. But one thing I will ask is, do you guys think that if doesn't make any sense anyway, but if they somehow were able to get over to Essos, like, do you think they'd do well over there?
No.
No.
No. Well, okay then. They'd run to the Dothraki.
Doesn't a ship of them get like assailed and like they get sold like over by Marine or something like that? Did I make that up?
No, I'm pretty sure that happened. They were waiting for some ship that was prophesized, and then a ship actually came, but it was like a slaver ship that took them and sold them into slavery.
Yeah, Mother Mole.
But I meant
Yeah.
if they got over there in numbers, 50,000 of them get over there, and like, do you think they'd be able to establish anything?
No.
Sort of what I mean.
No, I think they would have been
They're
ripped
not
to
the
shreds.
Like the only reason they're getting this close and over the wall is Mance. Like they're not that organized, and the only place I think that they would ever thrive as a people is the Iron Islands because they cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, I think if Mance was still in power and somehow they got a ship and were able to go to Essos, I'm pretty sure they still would have been broken. Just because their fighting they're so used to fighting in snow or anything else that they would probably just be ripped apart. They don't know where to hide without.
Yeah, any trained military force kind of has an advantage. They just have the advantage of numbers.
The other
Against
thing
the Black Brothers.
And like guerrilla warfare,
It's not really being addressed in the book, but in real life, they'd probably be dying from being exposed to new diseases.
That's true.
Probably more so if they went to Essos, because in Westeros, people are coming and going. So it's like when the English came to America and brought smallpox with them and shit,
Yeah, but we got those motherfuckers back with some syphilis.
I mean, not just to like try to assimilate with another culture, but I think a lot of them would be wiped out from basic disease. And if George was a really realistic writer, he would probably need to address that at some point if this kept going, which I don't think it will.
Yeah, I don't think it will. Speaking of getting going, let's move on to our next chapter. Move ahead just a few days, but we go back a few chapters to Tyrion 5. And let's see. I'll do that one actually. Tyrion's on the Shy Maid, and as they encounter heavy amounts of fog in the Sorrows, which is kind of a sad area. They go through like an old abandoned ruins of a city. It seems like it was a kind of a great city, which includes the Temple of Sorrow, which used to be called the Temple of Love, and it really makes Tyrion sad. The main thing of this chapter is that they go into the fog, and Tyrion realizes that, oh, wait a second, it's Griff and young Griff, and I think I know who all of you are. And he just sort of figures all this out and kind of chastises them, saying, like, your ruse wouldn't have fooled anyone, and it's a good thing that you've got Illyrio on your side because you wouldn't have fooled me. Young Griff, of course, is pretty stupid, and he's like, he knows who I am. And Tyrion's like, now I do. Thanks for confirming it, which is great. So we get this brief bit where we're kind of getting all of this, he's Aegon, survives somehow, which Tyrion can't figure out, which doesn't make sense to the reader. And then that's, quickly interrupted because we come across the stone men who are utilizing the currents to set a trap, and yada, yada, yada. Tyrion now has grayscale.
Or he was dead. It was one of those classic George cliffhangers.
Yeah. We know what happens. So
Right, until you flip through the book
and
see more Tyrion chapters.
I never thought he was going to die right here. I thought obviously, it's one of those, they're leaving us wanting more, but yeah. He's Tyrion. Even though he's become kind of a sad sack of shit, he's not going to die. He still has to have time.
So I feel like George was trying to write this as kind of like how he writes his horror, but failed. Like, it's not as good as his other
stuff. Right,
because
he's good at that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a pale imitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have to say, when I, you get the kind of essence of horror when you're reading this this chapter, but I read it on a plane, and it was dark. I read it last weekend, and right when he was about to be attacked by the stoneman and pushed off the boat, we hit some turbulence, and it scared the shit out of me. So
I feel like a never-ending story moment.
There's something on the wing.
Eerie. Yeah, I was already feeling eerie, and then the plane dropped, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like, I should stop reading. I just need to sit here and pray for a second." But yeah, you still get that kind of essence of horror, but it was not as good as some of his other chapters. That's for sure.
Dude, by the way, these books are perfect to read on a fucking plane.
Yeah, you could, like, if it's like a 2-hour flight, you could read through like 3 chapters and and then you're there. And I kind of lost in these books.
I couldn't
Did
get
you
a
think that
TikTok,
maybe
I
there
had
was
to
some
just go to
snakes on your plane?
No, Samuel L. Jackson was there to take care of me. It's okay.
I find that these books don't travel very well just due to their bulk.
No, I mean like on Audible. I put my
Right.
headphones on. Dotrice's voice lulls me to sleep.
I hate Dotrice, so
You know, I started my last flight like Ned was alive, and then by the time I woke up, he was dead. It was great.
See, I always have.
What do you mean?
like
I'm just a shy maid that doesn't know much about the ways of the world.
I bring a little bag, and normally I can fit one book because I have the hardcovers. So I can bring one. So I brought Dance instead of Feast, so I wasn't able to read the same chapter until this morning.
It's a good call. I mean, it'd be hard to bring both. They're a little thick for that. I almost wish that we would get an official Feast Dance release that's like here they are in like the author's order.
yeah.
I mean, he will. I don't think he would do that, but it would be kind of interesting since the way he wrote them.
That would be smart of the publisher, though. They can make a boatload of money off of books that have already been published.
So isn't there a rumor that George wrote a chapter where Tyrion actually meets like the head of the Stone Men and has a conversation with him?
What?
I never heard that.
I've heard that, but
That'd be.
I don't remember any details. I've heard that in passing.
What's the leader of the Stone Men's name supposed to be? I forgot. It's like
Fuck.
I'm flipping through to find it.
It's a Lord something.
The Shrouded Lord.
The Shrouded Lord. Yeah, I was going to say the Drowning Lord, but that's not right.
Okay, do you like the part in this chapter where they're like, wait a second, we passed that same shit a little while ago. Like, rivers only flow one way, and then the boy's like, the river will flow the way it wants to. Like, just
Did that confuse anybody else? Like, how did that happen? They just spun around and went back the same way? I didn't get it.
just casually, he's like, it'll flow however it chooses.
The magic of the river.
What
Well, like,
the
I
hell
bet,
kind
like,
of thing
the
is
part-
that to say?
The part that I did find, like, you know, particularly foreboding and kind of, you know, creepy in this is when he's talking about how they're going down the river, and you sort of see this coming, and they're talking about how they haven't had the sails up the whole time. They've just been letting the river take them, and I'm like, oh shit. So like they have no ability to maneuver really, other than just like, you know, poking the oars out and trying to, you know, move around. You're like, yeah, that's not gonna end well in a second, is it? So
Well, it's a good thing that George wrote, you know, Ysilla grabbed the tiller. A little rhyming thing going. That was cute.
Ysilla and the Tilla.
Also, when they pass the other ship, the Fisher King, I almost said Kingly.
was it
And they're like,
Kingfisher,
blah, blah,
Fisher King? I don't
blah.
remember.
What news in Volantis? Do you feel like he's just really hardcore trying to wedge in political intrigue from Essos like nobody gives a shit about?
I can see that.
I mean, because it's when I first read it, I was like, oh, that's cool. But the more I read it, I'm like, this doesn't mean anything. Nobody cares. And they're so fucking, like, Volantis is so isolated.
You mean George was trying to weave stuff in, or the characters? Is that what you're saying?
Like George, yeah, he keeps like peppering it with all this crap
Okay.
about the triarchs and whatever, and the elephants and the tigers, and it's in the world book too, and it's like it just to me has no. Maybe I'm not getting
right.
it. Like I
You
just
don't
see
feel
what
it going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't see what bearing it has on the story. So you know how everyone always gets like pissed off at the other Tyrion chapter where they're on that road forever, and it just seems like it takes, oh my god, so long, or how like the Quentin Martell stuff just goes nowhere. This stuff kind of seems like really forced in.
Well,
Just
isn't that the complaint about the book in general, that it's just a travel log and we really should be starting to reach some of these like conclusion?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess if you think that there's another 2 books, that part doesn't really bother me, and I kind of like it. I like seeing more of the world, but with this particular stuff, how he keeps talking about, you know, the elephants and the tigers, I just don't see how it has any bearing or basis on the way the rest of the world conducts their business.
It doesn't.
If in George's mind, if he thought, you know, because he thought that he was going to be able to get winds out quickly after this book, and obviously that didn't happen. There might be something down the line that has to do,
Yeah, maybe.
you know, with Volantis that's really important, but it's to me, this is one of the things that I completely forget about, and I only remember when I reread the books, and then it's something that I once again forget about until I get to a chapter that talks about it again. So
Yeah.
maybe after, in retrospect, after we get the whole series, if we get the whole series, this might make more sense.
Probably, I guess.
So the way I view this is it's kind of like if I watch a Quentin Tarantino movie, it's sort of like a snapshot of just whatever's going on in his head at the time. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there that really doesn't have anything to do with the story he's telling. And you're just like, oh, okay, this is where he's at. And I feel like a lot of this stuff is just him spitballing and wasting time, like in the writing process. And he's like, what if this was going on? So he throws it in there and it's helping him write and get through it. I think that's all. To me, that's what it feels like. Some of it he is maybe setting up for later, or he's giving himself the ability to use it later, even if he doesn't. But I don't feel like he wants us to think any of these things are particularly important. He's just like, well, this is something that I want to have in there, so I'm throwing it in. And it also, I think, speaks to kind of his lack of focus, like he had in some of the previous books.
Well,
So
I think it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so you're comparing this to like the anime portion of Kill Bill?
No, not so
good,
much.
though.
Not so much an aside like that, but kind of like he just, I mean, if you, it's, I don't know, Tarantino is just, I figured, an easy reference because there's just a lot of stuff in those movies that's just clearly he's just being like, I think this is cool, look, and it's like that's all he's doing.
Well, it could be something that he either originally had more for and then realized was covered elsewhere, just decided not to develop, or something that he thought, well, I'll throw this in now and it'll be there if I want to pick it back up. It won't be so much of a non-sequitur.
I think it has.
To me, it's frustrating, and I think you're right, James. I think, like, if in retrospect, it'll probably make more sense, because the weird thing about these two books too is there's a lot of stuff that's been wrapped up, like coming out of Storm, and then he is starting new arcs and brings in a lot of new characters too. But it's like whenever he talks about the politics, like in Bravos or something, that to me seems to just have more bearing on the main story arcs and the main characters. And this shit in Volantis is just like, okay.
I think a lot of it has to do with his lack of editing, or the publisher's lack of editing of these books, compared to the other ones. In my opinion, if this is going to be something that's important down the line, we should have just, rather than peppering it through this book and just, dropping hints of Volantis all through. I mean, we could have had one Tyrion or one Daenerys chapter in the next book that they meet someone from Volantis and you download all this information at once when it's relevant. I think it's definitely the lack of editing that has to do with, him peppering this through this book with the Volantis stuff.
Well, yeah,
I can see that.
It's weird because, like, it piques my interest, that whole walled city and, like, you're not allowed to go in and blah, blah, blah. Like, that piques my interest. And then I think, oh, so are these characters going to, like, need to sneak in there somehow for whatever? And then they don't. Like, it you know what I mean? They just sail right past it.
Yeah.
So,
right. And
but
I mean,
look at the World Book and all the stuff he's been putting out. Well, look at what he's kind of actually spending his time on, what he seems to actually be interested in right now. It's this sort of stuff. I think this is what's flowing better for him. So.
Yeah, and I think, early, to bring up the Game of Thrones show, early in the series, I think that, George gave the showrunners a certain amount of information, and the fact that they included Talissa Stark from Volantis and we got to know information about Volantis from her, I think that he thought originally that this would have more importance. Why else would they bring up that aspect in the show?
That's so stupid, because the way she talks about it is, to me, way more like something that would happen in, like, Pentos or Cahor anyway. You know what I mean? Like, she's just stupid. That whole thing is stupid.
Right, but that's why I think if, the showrunners may have thought originally from George's original notes that, this was going to be an important aspect, and then when it kind of, didn't come of anything and he never came out with another book that explained it, they were just like, okay, well, let's kill her off. We'll never bring it up again.
I think you're giving them way too much credit, honestly.
The showrunners?
Yeah, I don't think no. I mean, because they very clearly had notes. They had the books in the first place, and they had notes from him, and they made significant changes that ruled out things that are clearly where George is going. So I don't think that they're going to spend so much time, like maybe keeping one option they think might possibly be open when they're closing off major story arcs that are already written. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
But that's just my opinion.
Grasping at rationalization for George to include this crap. It needs to be rationalized some way in my head.
Well, he wanted to get art made. He wanted to get beautiful art made of, the pictures of these cities and these characters, and so he had to put them in so someone could make the artwork.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because there is the two major political parties in Volantis, and maybe because I think, for the most part, from what we understand, Volantis is against Daenerys for the most part, but maybe there will be some kind of coup with the other, political party where they'll try to overthrow and take Daenerys' side and be part of
kind of how like
rebellion.
Got the second sons, with Dario.
Yeah, and then by the time they do it, she'll be like, "I'm in Westeros already. Goodbye."
Yeah, right. I'm sure.
Burn Essos and leave it behind.
Yeah. Well, it's a hard one to finish. So the first time you guys read this chapter, I mean, like, where were you at with Tyrion's storyline? How were you feeling? Because, yeah, he's definitely taken a turn, since leaving Westeros, obviously, and he went from a lot of people's favorite character to kind of just,
it's not great.
Yeah,
Right.
It's not great. And like, were you thinking like, okay, he's gonna pull out of this any second now? Like, what were you thinking?
I still like him. I don't understand a lot of the beef with him, to be honest. I mean, that kid is fucked up. Like, how would you react to any of that shit? You know what I mean? And like the crap he does, it's not that bad. He does some terrible things to people, but anyway. What about you, James? Most of it's in his head. He's having horrible thoughts, but
right, but we're in his head.
And he's stuff and he's drunk. I mean, who has not said something like shit when they're fucked up and drunk?
I just think that we left off in his last chapter of the third book at such like a cliffhanger, and it was kind of just so important. He was such a badass at that point. He killed his dad, and then all of a sudden we pick up, and I think that it's gonna catch that same momentum, but it hits a hard stop, and we have to deal with everything that. All these chapters that kind of are just like you said, a travel log. Like the chapter with him on the Valyrian road was just like hard to get through for me. And all the Tyrion chapters in this book, other than the one where he kind of finds out about Aegon, are just droll. I just don't think that they really capture my attention the way that the old Tyrion chapters do. And every single chapter he has to bring up Tysha. Yeah, he has to bring her up, and where do whores go?
Right.
That's the thing, right? He's. I mean, he is just he's suicidal. He's crazy depressed. His whole life has been turned upside down by other people, by the people that are supposed to be his family, his friends. I
just think if we weren't in his head and he was a secondary character and we saw him, it would be way easy to like pity him and I feel bad. He's gone through all this shit and I feel bad for him. But because we are in his head and we hear like the evil things that he thinks about and talking about wanting to like rape that septa or whatever, it's just like I start to dislike him. If we were looking at him from the outside, it'd be like, okay, he's a guy to pity. I feel bad, but not anymore. I think that now that we're in his head and we see what he actually thinks. In his dark time, I got a bad taste in my mouth for Tyrion in this book.
I do though. I still pity him because I feel like he's mentally ill right now. You know what I mean? Like he's deeply, deeply clinically depressed.
Yeah.
And he's probably drinking. Like he's been drinking.
Right. But I mean, it's not an excuse.
No,
I mean,
it's not an excuse.
I think part of it is just what Martin is doing with him is a bit of the problem.
Become some villain either. Like I don't see him as a villain. I still see him largely as a victim.
Well, he has no power. He can't be a villain if he has no power, right?
Yeah.
So if he had power right now, what would he be doing with it?
He's always been a victim. He's always been a victim, but he's had a little power. He's had a little bit of carte blanche in his own life provided by circumstance.
it's his name. He's a Lannister, so that has inherent behind the name, and he's always had that. So he doesn't have that anymore. Like I said at him, like he can't really be. He can have evil thoughts, and he can not like him. But he can be a true villain when he's dependent on, these guys, steering the boat and shit like that. We see his helplessness in the next two chapters when Jorah kidnaps him.
Yeah, I think what we get here is a transition from, like we said at the end of book 3, he's, he was the hand of the king, and he's, killed his father, and he's still kind of on that badass arc where, like, he was always one of my favorite characters, and for a lot of people, and George says has been his favorite character. But I think it was come to a point in the writing where I think George is like, well, I don't have anything for him to do right now. Like, I have some things I want for him to do later, and so he came up with this, and like, well, we can, he can introduce these other characters, and then I'll just kind of make him sad and mopey. And it's sort of like the things he's thinking and the way his emotional state is. Once he gets to a place where he's like back in the game, because he's not really in the game here anymore. He's watching kind of things that are going on in the game. Then we'll kind of see where his character is. We'll see if he comes back and says, okay, I'm gonna try to be a decent person again, or if he's just digs in and says, all right, my life was fucked up and he's given up on it. It's hard to really cast judgment right now, but he's definitely trending in a bad direction.
Well, but here's the thing about Tyrion that no one ever brings up is like he totally fucking murdered that singer. Like, that's fucked up. That's villainous.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but we liked him back then.
Yeah, we liked him back then, and he had reasons.
That's my thing, though. Like, that's okay. So, when he's on top and George is writing him well, we can forgive actually just in cold blood murdering someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of it has to do with atmosphere too. I mean, if you're like, at least in my head when I'm reading those chapters back when he's still in King's Landing, in the background I'm thinking or even hearing like jolly music, and the atmosphere is good, and so having him kill somebody in cold blood is just like, okay, we're just gonna keep moving along. But here it's like such a dark kind of, his whole atmosphere, everything that's around him is dark and gray and gross, and so it's easier for us to get a negative connotation behind it rather than when he's in King's Landing and at the top of his game and he has a lighter attitude.
Right. And you got to think that this was a singer who was directly threatening him, right? So there's a little bit of that aspect there. I mean, like I said, he's not the character that people like because he's honorable and Ned Stark and he plays the game straight. He's the character that is playing the game, that is bending the rules a little bit, but also has limits, that is also not like a complete shit like, his relatives and stuff. So I think that's a lot of the reason, why his appeal was.
Your real qualm with him is that he's not playing the game right now.
No, not exactly, because he right now he's intending harm in his thoughts, and again, people that have done nothing to him, that are not a threat to him in any way. Whereas before it's like, yeah, he's gonna kidnap his nephew and threaten Cersei, but he's not actually gonna do it, right?
But you know what? I mean, it's like he just had to stand before a kangaroo court that was led by his own fucking father. Like they tried to kill him. Tell me that doesn't make you cynical going through something like that.
Then you find out
that your wife, whom you loved and who actually loved you, was like gang raped because your dad was just such a bastard. Like, that would fuck you up. I'm sorry. I pity him, and unless he actually does go out and start raping or murdering people and these thoughts come to fruition, I don't think it's right to have some Orwellian judgment on him where we're policing his thoughts and making a huge sweeping generalization of his entire character based on these circumstances alone. I don't think that's justified.
Well, but I think that's the way a novel works when we're inside the character's head. That's what we're supposed to do.
And I think attitudes will change as as his character develops in later books. We may not feel that way later. Right, and I didn't feel that way towards the beginning of the series, but right now that's how I feel about him. And we have to remember, like, he's still, at the end of the day, as far as what we know, he is Tywin's son. So the fact that he, back in King's Landing, when he had that singer killed, it was just like, okay, someone's trying to fuck with my political prowess, so I'm gonna take this guy down. but do it behind the scenes the same way that my father would have done it. I think that back then he still had a lot of Tywin-esque in him, and we've never been inside of Tywin's head either. Tywin may have been this evil as well, but we just never really, heard his thoughts. If you know what I mean.
I think it's definitely a definitive just fact that Tywin is that evil. I mean, look at what he did to Tysha. That's evil. Just that one thing.
Yeah,
right.
Tywin's crossed the line many times, yeah.
Yeah, in his actions, but never, like I said, we've never been in his head to hear all the, the things that
there's like redeeming qualities where he's like, I really wish I didn't have to have my men rape this girl.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Been there. And then just, this is a completely off side note, but do you think Tyrion has like a spidey sense with his nose? Because once his nose starts itching, something bad always happens. It's like his spidey sense.
I hadn't noticed that.
I hadn't noticed that either, but I will keep an eye out.
Yeah, whenever he's, my nose itched, and then a freaking stone man landed on the boat. It's his spidey sense, I feel.
Is this going to be like a hot pie equals murder kind of theory?
Not quite that tinfoil.
No, this is more along the lines.
I wonder. I'm sure there's already like something on Reddit, right?
Yeah. It's like when Bran fell out of the tower. That activated his power. Tyrion got his nose cut off. Activated his power.
With great power comes no responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if that is like a theme, that having these violent near-death experiences activates some sort of ish in these people. Because you're right, like Bran's power was activated when he fell. Tyrion's nose. What else?
I mean, more likely it's just, like when George is writing. Yeah. He's writing and he's like, okay, something's coming up. He itches his nose. Tyrion's nose itches. It just keeps happening. I don't know. I don't know. He's like, that's right. We got to remind people of his grotesque nose.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you guys have anything else that you want to talk about Tyrion's journey here, this chapter, before we move on?
So I'm reading something right now that says that Cersei is going to lose a foot because Tim lost a tongue, Jaime lost a hand, and it's a Lannister tinfoil theory.
They're building Lannister with body parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, what?
They don't have a whole lot to work with. They only have a nose and a hand.
I have seen a theory that like Cersei's gonna lose something just because people.
Hopefully her fucking head.
Yeah.
Why would she lose a foot?
Why not?
Oh, that's a guy on Reddit that wrote it down.
I hope Cersei loses her spirit before she loses her life. That's all I hope. I don't like her.
Just crush her and then kill her.
Yeah, I love to hate her. I think a lot of people think that, her walk of atonement was part of like breaking her spirit, but I think that just made her more vengeful rather than...
She did lose her hair.
Oh yeah, and her hair had a lot to do with her personality. Long golden locks.
I feel like she's completely lost her mind already. So
whoa, guys! I found another one on Reddit. Tyrion nose itches when he perceives injustice.
Ooh.
Okay, so basically, they give instances of that, but it's a whole thing. When it also says Theon smiles when he is seeking Stark approval or embarrassed.
Okay, I've read this one. Then this
Jaime
sounds so
becomes aware of his missing hand. Jon flexes his fingers when he's fearful or unsure. And Arya chews her lip when she's duplicitous.
Those are it's interesting. I don't know. I don't think there's anything intentional to that, but maybe. Yeah. I mean, just the way he writes. So let's go ahead and let's see if we can make this work. All right. So after Tyrion 5 in Dance, we move to Sam 3 in Feast. This is a few days later. It's April 5th of 300. And Matt, do you have the recap for us?
I'm going to read the one, but I just want paraphrase the chapter as Daron's a drunk dick, Aemon's decompensating, and camel cunts.
So Matt Hedrum has left us due to technical difficulties, and so stepping in to read his chapter will be Hannah.
Yeah, so basically, Darren's a drunk dick, Eamon's decompensating, Sam throws a punch, and camel cunts. End of.
Exactly as Matt would have said it too.
You left
out a couple.
Yeah.
Okay, in real life, Sam looks out across the roofs of Bravos as the sun sets. Darian was supposed to go back already and is probably drunk again. Gilly peeks out from behind her wild, unkempt hair and says that Darian prefers to stay where there is wine and smiles. Darian spends all his time with the Bravos and courtesans now and is trying to write a song about a courtesan called Moonshadow who rewarded his singing with a kiss. At times he plays in the room and wakes the baby, storming out afterward in anger and not returning for days at a time. The Titan sounds nightfall, waking the baby, which in turn wakes Maester Aemon. The Maester's wits have been wandering more and more of late, and it takes him a moment to remember where he is. He is very sick. Sam used to use the last of their coin on a healer who gave him some dream wine and said nothing more could be done. Maester Aemon wants to go down to the ships and learn more about dragons, but Sam says he's too weak. This is not the first time they've had that argument. Aemon refuses to eat and drink any more dream wine, and he takes some water. He brings up the docks again, and Sam tells him to go. And he brings up the docks again, and Sam tells Sam to go in his place to find someone who has seen dragons. Darren brought back the tale one night from the alehouses, but he was drunk and could not remember the details. Sam thinks probably just made it up, but Aemon is convinced there is truth to the story. Sam says he would not know where to begin and that Aemon can go when he is stronger. Aemon points out that he will never get stronger, nor will he see Old Town again. He says that he's been kept alive for a purpose. He still remembers dragons. The last ones died before he was born, but the dreams of them, just as his brother once did. Oh, but he dreams of him just as his brother once did. He says they are nearing an era of prophecy, of wonder and terror. He realizes he should have stayed at the wall, but the cold was preserving him. But it is too late now, and he needs Sam to learn of dragons. Sam goes out into the night and checks many inns of the Ragnarman's harbor, including the Inn of the Green Eel, the Black Bargeman, the Fog House, and the Outcast Inn, and the House of Seven Lamps. Outside a brothel called Cattery's, he bumps into two men, bravos, named Taro and Orbello. Taro speaks to him in Bravosi. The other translates the insult into the common tongue. They think he is dressing above his station as lords and bravos wear somber colors such as black. A girl joins the conversation and tells him that he's from the Night's Watch, and another member of the watch is singing to the sailor's wife at the Happy Port. Arya gets the bravos to leave and offers Sam the last of her clams. She asks what he's doing there, and he explains that they're bound for Old Town. Sam asks who she is, and she responds that her name is Kat and gives a fake backstory. She asks what ship they're sailing on, and Sam tells her they booked passage on the Lady Eushonora. This confuses Arya as that ship sailed days ago. Sam was unable to convince him to wait for Maester Aemon to recover his strength for 3 days. But after that, he sailed without them and kept their coin. Arya repeats that Darren is at the Happy Port and is about to marry the sailor's wife, a whore who only beds those who marry her. Sam takes off for the brothel. When he arrives, a one-eyed whore named Yena accosts him until Darren calls him off. Darren is drunk and is already married the sailor's wife, though the marriage lasts only one night. Sam asks Tyrion to help him find out about dragons, but he refuses to do it until the morrow. Sam says they are brothers, and Tyrion takes his cloak off of the sailor's wife's shoulders and throws it at Sam, saying he is through with the watch. Sam hits him and then tackles him and pummels him. Someone pulls him off Tyrion, so he hits that man too and ends up tossed in the canal. He sinks to the bottom, nearly drowns, but a summoner islander named Xando, who had been in a brothel, pulls him out. He is mate on the Cinnamon Wind and has seen the dragons. That was long.
It's a long one. Yeah, you could have probably skipped through some of that if you wanted to. But no, great job, Hannah. It's, pinch hitting there. So, this is, like we said before, this is like a really sad chapter. And there's a lot of shit going down. Some unfortunate shit. Poor Sam walking around is like, oh, you got a sword, you think you're a tough guy. Wait, no. Oh, you're wearing drab clothing, you think you're a rich guy. Well, I don't know what's going on. So many mistakes are made by people in these books.
And I just think Sam, he's got like such a pure heart that, like he doesn't think twice about just giving up all of his money to all these stupid ass reasons why, and then he's left broke and nobody's there helping him out.
Yeah, and John, it's just like a lot of these mistakes are not his fault. Like, could he have, like, was there really any indication with Darren that he was just going to do this beforehand? I mean, not that, he was wrongfully sent to the wall and all that, so it sort of makes sense to try to get away. But he knows the score. He knows what's coming. Like,
right, and then even for John to send Sam with enough money to get him halfway there was bogus, or not even enough money, but a ship that's only going to take him halfway there.
Well, no, they had a ship to go the whole way.
I thought that it was only going to take him to Bravos, and then he had to.
No, they put in port, and like Maester Aemon needed the warmth and stuff, and they're like, okay, we're leaving. He's like, well, he's not ready to travel, so they left without him. Like, they had full passage to Old Town.
Oh, okay. I guess
they got screwed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he got screwed.
That would really not make any sense.
Right. Well, that's part of, like, I'm not the biggest fan of John. I don't hate him as much as some other people hate him. But I was just like, that's such a dick move. You got him halfway there, and then just like figure out your way from there on.
Yeah, that would suck. But I mean, like, they clearly, he had extra traveling money and all that too, which is what gets burnt up on this like crazy hotel.
Yeah, and then the fact that he hired a healer to come and basically say, oh, there's nothing I can do, and then the guy kept his money.
Yeah.
He gave him some dream wine, and that was it.
You're like, oh, that'll be $1,000.
Right, exactly. And your maester's still gonna die.
Have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then just reading Aemon's parts in this part too is depressing, where he's having like those flashbacks where he thinks he's still with Egg.
Yeah.
It's so dark, and then Sam is, he doesn't want to be a dick or anything, so in his head he's like, it's because you're blind. I heard this 5 times. We've had this conversation so many times before.
Right. The saddest part to me is when he says, like, I should have known better, the cold preserves, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, even Maester Aemon comes to terms with that. The cold preserves and the heat, like, destroys, or whatever he said.
Yeah. If he'd stayed at the wall, he would have lasted a bit longer, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, but again, this is another one of those things, like, what options does John have? He needs someone credible to go to the Maesters. He needs someone to go down there and learn to be the new Maester, which they don't have time for. Like, I don't know.
Right.
That's the thing. I think this was one of the holdovers of the whole time skip thing. Was going to be like, okay, so Sam goes and becomes a Maester, and he's like, wouldn't let that go. But they definitely don't have time to do that the way things are moving. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do.
So you think, if there was the 5-year gap, do you think John would have died at the end of the 5-year gap or before?
Oh, that's a good question. It would have had to have been. Well, no, because I mean the 5-year gap would have happened within the same story, so it could have been either, I guess. It would probably be. It would probably be before, because afterwards, then you're saying he's been leading these people for that long. It would make sense for them to have so much mistrust, right?
Right. Yeah. Or maybe the only thing that I could think about is maybe, it was 5 years of them being pissed off at John and hating them. That's when.
Oh yeah. Well,
that's
that's another angle. Yeah.
Instead of a couple months, he's just been leading these people on for years, and
they just finally had enough.
Right.
Make them more sympathetic, maybe.
Yeah, would that also make it like a 5-year autumn too? Like, or would they have been
into winter? I don't know. I think all of these questions are probably why he ended up scrapping it, because some of this stuff didn't make any sense. But what were you saying, Hannah?
I was gonna say, like, Sam says something about how the ship left without them, and he's like, we'd probably be at Duskendale by now, or maybe even Pentos. And Duskendale and Pentos are almost exactly opposite each other. So what kind of fucked up journey are they going to be taking? Like, the longest, were they just zigzagging down the narrow sea? Like, what the shit is that? It just struck me so hard as being a huge error.
Or it could have been that they were going to, pick up things in, on one side of the narrow sea and then try to make a profit on the other side, and Sam was just kind of along for the journey.
I mean, that is like fucking stupid, though, honestly.
Right.
Because Duskendale is not even like a big port of call. If you're going to go to Duskendale, you might as well go to fucking King's Landing.
Yeah, that's true.
Every now and then you're like, George, did you look at your map? But he's pretty good about it. The show is not good about it. But. Maybe
Galltown?
Right.
I can understand hugging like the SOC coast and going to Pentos before you go through the Stepstones and get to Old Town, but Duskendale, like, of all the fucking names to throw
I'll
out.
hear no more of Duskendale.
Yeah, I think George just
really
loves
bitter,
writing Duskendale.
Yeah,
like, it's such a
bitter
small
subject.
town. Like, Galltown is this huge port city that's like saying we're gonna go to Salt Pans and then we're gonna go to Pentos, and then for no reason we're gonna go back to Dragonstone. Like, it's just stupid.
Yeah. Well, and that would have made their journey that much longer too.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, yeah, they would have been backtracking a lot.
Yeah, and you got to imagine it. Whatever port they stay at, they probably stay there for at least like a week. It's not just an overnight kind of thing.
Yeah, because Pentos is only like slightly south of Duskendale on the opposite side of the narrow sea.
Yeah.
So that would have been like a crazy zigzag to take. I don't get it at all. There's no reason for like Duskendale and not King's Landing. I get it.
Yeah, like I said, I think that George just really likes writing things about Duskendale. So much shit happens in that insignificant little town. Yeah, am I the only one who, on the reread, the whole time I'm just thinking like this fucking Darren guy's gonna get what's coming to him, and I'm loving it. But
kind of, yeah.
Honestly, though, like, I feel so bad for Sam because he has never once had to make a decision in his life. The only things he's ever done has been told what to do, or like when he was serving John, he'd provide him with information and John would make the decision. And now he's in this, foreign place and he has to make decisions. There's no leader. Like, he's the leader and it's really slowly dawning on him.
He's ill-equipped.
It's just crushing him, the amount of responsibility. It's so sad.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't it also Matt? Kind of? Oh yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Hey guys, I am.
Hey.
Am I still cutting out or doing funky shit?
You sound normal now.
Oh, good. So this chapter I had notes about Aemon. So, do you think all Targaryens, regardless, dream of dragons? And is that like why Tyrion's a secret Targ?
I mean, the dragons are such a huge thing for them. It's their house sigil. I feel like they would have dragon dreams of some kind just because they're around so much of it their whole life. I don't know if it's necessarily some like mystical or blood related thing, but
I mean, I don't think that's why Tyrion's a secret tar, but I think, yeah, that's probably some evidence of it.
Do you really think Aemon believes in the prophecy of the prince that was promised? And do you think maybe he's the one who told Rhaegar?
That he's the one that told Rhaegar?
Like maybe it was something that he had kind of studied and was into, and then like had brought to Rhaegar's attention. You mean?
When?
Yeah.
You have told Rhaegar.
He visited King's Landing a few times, right? Like when he was in the Watch.
I believe so, and I think he also was corresponding with his brother.
Yeah.
So I think he might have like sent a letter down to Rhaegar at some point and been like, maybe you should read this book. And Rhaegar's like, oh, it turns out I have to be a warrior.
Yeah, but
I don't think that like he didn't go back after the war, right? But before the war, he would have gone back, or maybe they would have come to him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Rhaegar was like a really well-read person himself, so he could have just found it on his own and been interested. He could have had some kind of waif visit. His dad, before he went mad, could have said something like.
Well, yeah. The story is that one day he was always in the books and like in the library, and one day he just showed up and was like, "Okay, I need to train now." So I think it's assumed that he found something in a book, or he found the prophecy. I mean, there could have been a correspondence, whatever. I mean, there's room for that.
All right. The second part would be, what would the repercussions of Daeron have been had Arya not stepped in later?
I don't.
Like, what do you mean? Like
so
for him or on the Watch?
So, yeah, for him and the Watch. Like, obviously they're in Essos, so he's not going to be immediately decapitated. But like, would the brothers send like another ship to get him, or would they just be like, "Oh, that sucks, we lost that guy"?
Yeah, I really don't think they have the resources.
Yeah, they don't have. I think that he even knows that. That's probably why he, abandoned the Watch, is because he was sent so far away from them, and they have so few men and so little money to actually do anything like that. That he probably knew that he was going to get away with it. And the only way that he actually and he knew Sam wasn't going to do anything about it, He's probably...
He would disappear and change his name anyway. I mean, the thing is, even in Westeros, they rely on the lords, right? Like, the Starks or whoever find these deserters and bring them back. Right. Like, they'll send men after them, but if someone gets, like, to Old Town or something, like, they're just like, okay, like, they'll post, like, this person has, left the Watch, be on the lookout sort of thing. I mean, the most they could have done was maybe... try to hire an assassin or something to go get him, but again, he'd be gone.
We don't have the money.
And I don't think they have that kind of money. Yeah.
Plus, I don't know what an assassin costs.
Later, isn't that part of it? Like the indictment against Jon is, you're letting people leave when we have so few numbers as it is. How come Homeboy gets to go and not me? Like shit like that, It's just...
Okay. So, again, this ends with Sam thinking he's drowned. Like, we get that little, scare for a second. But the Summer Islander, what's his name? Zahoro or something?
Nando.
Yeah, I think so.
Zondo.
Oh, Zondo. Yeah, so the Cinnamon Wind, have we seen that ship again? Or earlier?
Since this, we've seen the Cinnamon Wind like all over, I thought, but
it's a really
after
old
this,
too, right? Like, doesn't that have to do with something like all them fucking wives Maegor had? Isn't it mentioned in the World Book at some point?
So I looked it up. The Cinnamon Wind is at Karth when Daenerys is there, and that's where they see the dragons.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Do we see it after this, though?
Well, they get on it, and that's where Aemon dies and is put in a cask of rum, and then they drink the rum, which is fucked up, but...
Yeah. After, but that's what I mean. It's like after they drop him at Old Town, I don't think. Yeah, I think
maybe we see him in Winds of Winter, but we
Marwyn.
never got that book.
Marwyn boards it to go to Marine.
That's
That's what it is.
Yep.
So we will see it again.
Will we, Adam?
Well, if the books are ever published. I'm still operating under the assumption that someday we'll at least get what's been written.
Yeah.
I really hope so.
So that's all I had on this chapter for questions for the group. Anyone else?
Well, we were discussing while you were gone a bit about just how sad and depressing this chapter is, Maester Aemon in particular, and probably the part for me is when he says oh, I should have known, like the cold preserves, and you're like, oh, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, and their healthcare system over in Essos is kind of like ours. They'll take all your money to tell you you're fine, and there's nothing you can do. Yeah,
you just need to lose some weight, Maester Aemon. All right, goodbye. Yeah. All right, too fat, skin and bones. Bina's note, and I agree. She said that this pairs particularly well with the John chapter from the previous reread, and even the somewhat in this chapter, the one that we had in this chapter, this reread as well, where John realizes that he has to forego dinner with his friends. He has to be alone. Aemon, and Sam are kind of pondering the same thing, that John's heart has turned to stone. But also, the fact that he's man, these books might have some useful things about the wildlings and or about the others, and I've sent away most of our scholars, the people that could read and shit. Not very smart, but I feel like sending Sam, he kind of had to do, maybe, if he thought he had time, which I don't think we have time. We discussed that maybe this, that had to do with the gap. The 5-year gap, obviously was the plan, and then didn't. But sending Aemon, he needed to send someone with credibility to try to get people to his side, which, I understand. But he had to know that Aemon, there's a good chance he wouldn't make the trip. Well, so, if he had kept Aemon up there, it would have been better.
I thought the reason he moved Aemon was because he has King's blood in him, and Melisandre was going
to right. Yeah, that's true. He felt that he had to get rid of him because of the King's blood. That's true.
Well, probably better to move him to, he's kind of like a figurehead up there, and John probably knew, okay, well, he's a ticking time bomb, and if I send him away, news of his death won't get back for so long, so maybe it's part of it too, is just putting off facing that with the rest of the men.
I disagree. I think having Aemon be John's champion gave legitimacy to John being Lord Commander.
No, I know, but now he's dead. Do you know what I mean? If he sends him away and he's still alive.
Oh, you meant the men? You wouldn't want the men to have to deal with his death.
Yeah, they not knowing right away.
But especially if it was Stannis that was burn him for the blood, and then that would just ruin everything.
Right.
So he can't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Well, guys, anything else?
I was just
Arya.
Oh yeah, Arya. So is this because Arya gets her sight taken away because she kills Darren without pretty much being told to do so, right?
Right.
So at this point, I just especially with Arya, I kind of just see that she's just not power hungry, but she's just she's basically been given a license to kill. And she just doesn't follow the rules as she should.
I think this is when she kills Daeron. That's her showing her Starkiness still. That she knows that guy deserted, and that deserters of the Night's Watch have to be that's a death sentence. So I think that's
what
still.
What are the rules there, though? If you know somebody needs that gift, and you are a faceless man. You can't just take it upon yourself,
I feel like that the gift cannot be. You don't choose. The whole idea is you're not choosing to give the gift. If you're somewhere operating alone and there's no one there to give you orders, you still have someone else or some other. There's some way they have of knowing that okay, someone's telling me, the god is telling me, that they need to give the gift. This was just her being I need to kill this dude. It was personal.
job perks, right? Like we get free water and soda at work. You know what I mean? We get free tickets to some shows at work.
Jeez,
Like,
that'd be nice.
Just like, she's a.
I mean, water. Wow.
I'm paying for my coffee like a sucker.
Oh, we get like fancy, cool,
we do get free
ice
coffee,
cold
actually.
water. No, but seriously, like,
yeah, I don't know. It's
do you know what I mean? It's like if she sees an injustice, does she go to them and does she have to pay, or can she get a freebie? Can she just take care of herself? Like, she's cutting out the middleman there. What's the problem?
I think it's the motive. I think it's the motive that it's very personal to her, and that it's like it's her Starkiness, like we said. And they just kind of somehow know all that, but yeah, I don't know.
I think like the faceless men don't necessarily care about the Night's Watch at all. So her, trying to follow the rules of a Westerosi custom is just, more reason for her to be punished for that, I think. She's supposed to be no one. She's supposed to be following, the faceless men or whatever, that god with no face or whatever he is. So she's just
the many-faced god.
The many-faced god, yeah.
That blind thing out real quick. So I feel like that's kind of part of it anyway, and that was just an excuse. Like, they'll wait for her to do whatever the fuck and then have her go blind to hone her skills. I bet you it's something to do for everyone.
See, I don't know. I thought that, in my opinion, I always thought the wise man or whatever, once she did see through the cat's eyes, I thought that he was kind of surprised by that. I don't think that he had motive to like activate her warging, if you know what I mean. Do you
No, but I think what she's saying is they take people's sight away, like as a routine thing, because it helps them train, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah, no, yeah. She definitely, the normal faceless man is not like using cats and shit to cheat the system. So
yeah, because it just seems like a really specific magic, and so it doesn't seem like this is some unique punishment that they formulated for her. I bet you they wait for somebody to step out of line like that, and then they do this as part of it. It seemed very routine, and not a lot of fanfare for it. So I bet you it's part of the regular training, and they just used that one action as an excuse for her. Because it seems like an important part, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
because you lose your eyes, your other senses improve. Like for an assassin, that's important.
Look at any like ninja movie too, right? Do it blindfold or whatever.
Especially the American ones with American ninjas. It's like the Meet the Parents of like the Song of Ice and Fire chapters, because it's like nothing. Like they needed a room with a fireplace, so it was the room with the giant orgy bed. They needed and it cost way too much. And then the ship left them, and he's wearing the wrong clothes, and he's wearing this everything they do is wrong, and he's like, well, I can't do anything else. It's just so bad. And you're just sitting there like, oh, I wish that this didn't happen. And then you're like, well, most of the stuff I don't think they could have done anything else, because. I mean, the one thing that you could say would have made sense is whatever, just keep going to Old Town, let the man die on the boat. In some ways, it's probably the most logical choice, but at the same time, you got to try to save him.
It makes me wonder too. God, John had to know Aemon was clutching to life.
Well, he's 103 years old or something.
Right. I mean, he's sloughing loose the mortal coil pretty quickly. So I wonder if John's whole thing, maybe he knew Tyrion wasn't the most reliable person and wanted to put Sam in a position where he'd have to ascend to decision making and leadership skills. It's like he wasn't getting it at the wall. He wasn't prompted enough. So,
I have a question after you're done. I just thought.
Go ahead.
So John sends Daron on this trip to sing, as basically a recruiter, to sing songs about the Night's Watch. What songs are there about the Night's Watch besides the night that ended and Brave Danny?
He's supposed to be making up songs to go along with the others are here, everyone fear. I don't know. He's supposed to be doing that because he's a songwriter.
Right. Instead, he's just wooing the prostitutes.
Have you ever seen Firefly?
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna marry this sex worker.
Yeah, but she's the best sex worker. It's gonna be great.
Hey, Slayer, why are you interrupting my wedding? I'm sure whatever songs they have would be bad, but John, music and arts and all that are not his thing anyway. But he's like, well, people like songs, so if we give them songs, they'll come to our aid and they'll think the cause is real. Like, I don't know. It's certainly a misfire for him because I don't really understand why he thought that was going to be a great idea. But
Yeah.
Well, what kind of marketing campaign do you have to do? Like, come and be celibate. You're probably going to freeze to death if you don't starve to death.
Well,
I think part of it had to be that he knew Darren wasn't the most useful fighter, and maybe he just he needed someone else to go with them to help with Aemon and everything, instead of just Sam on his own. So, I mean, it could have been that. And he just said, make up songs.
So we know that Darren has like a good voice, but like even before, isn't he sent to like Eastwatch by the Sea because they're paying too much for pepper or some bullshit?
Wait, what?
I'm pretty sure they're paying too much for like olive oil or pepper or something like that. So they send him to Eastwatch to sing, and maybe that will lower the price. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
That's how all business is conducted in this world, is through song.
That and finger snaps and like.
Yeah, it says that Mormont sends him to Eastwatch by the Sea, hoping that he can aid Cutter Pike with dealing with merchant ships. I'm trying to remember exactly what the skill was there. I don't know, but. Yeah, well, so you take Yoren
and an economist. That's what we don't.
Did John meet Yoren? Was he the one that took him up to Castle Black? No, he went up with Benjen and them.
No, I think
he never met Yoren.
I think he did meet Yoren. Didn't they meet up on the road? And that's when he realizes that the Watch is just a bunch of rapists and criminals.
No,
Yeah. He was going back south. Was that it, or was he coming? He was bringing boys with them, and then he went back south.
Right.
In a Game of Thrones. So he meets this really hard traveling guy who's been doing this position, which is probably kind of a plum job for the Night's Watch. I mean, it's a lot of work, and you got to be a tough guy, but at the same point, you're not like stuck at the wall all the time.
Yeah.
So he replaces them with this singer that has really no talent.
Well, with the Night's
Watch,
I'm
starting to think I would have stabbed John too. Just saying.
Yeah. No, I've said I'm not the hugest fan of John. I think in this book in particular, it just makes me grow to hate him even more. I would have stabbed him too. But does the Night's Watch just have one recruiter at a time? Like, was Yoren the only?
I would hope not.
Right.
It does. He's the only one that's ever mentioned, and because their numbers are so low, it's possible. They also relied heavily on King's Landing and Winterfell and other places, just automatically sending men up. So, like, if Yoren didn't have to be there, like, they were going to fulfill their duty and be like, okay, we're going to send our guards to send you 5 guys that have been convicted. So they got enough of that going on, but clearly most places aren't doing it. So I think his job is mostly to go to the places that are not, fulfilling the kind of contract.
Well, I mean, they probably have an okay number during Robert's reign, but then Ivan the Terrible gets put on the throne for a couple years, and he's just beheading people. There's no one left to.
Yeah, but because of the wars, like, food is scarce. Like, that's one of the things that's how he gets like hot pie and lami. It's like, do you want to be able to eat 3 meals a day? And this is what you have to do to get that food, like, without having to kill yourself every day.
Yeah, I think that's also one reason why they got such weak people going up to the wall rather than fighters, is because of the war. Even though someone committed a crime, you're going to keep him on your army because he's a good fighter. But if someone like Hot Pie, let's just send him to the wall, because what is he going to do during battle?
He's not useful. And in peacetime, you have men to send up to say, okay, we'll send these guys to the wall. In wartime, it's like, off with their heads, or give them a sword and put them back in line.
Yeah, and this war's been going on for so long now.
John chose Darren as a singer because he's trying to do a whole, like, the Wall's Got Talent thing. And the thing with the pepper is, like, just trying to get sponsorship,
Is that going to be a new show? The Wall's Got Talent. Simon Cowell's going to be on that one
The
too.
Wall's Got Talent.
Well, I think that's what he's doing,
It's
right?
a hybrid show.
Trying to recruit people through song, getting sponsors.
I dreamed a dream. No.
No, stop it.
I don't know. Like, how do you recruit people to the Watch in the middle of a war where no one can eat, and the Watch really can't feed them either? And you're trying to tell people that like the demons of your fairy tale stories are coming to kill you. I mean, it's a hard job. Well, but I mean, that's the most urgent part. Where, like, at least when you're talking to the lords and stuff, like, because he's supposed to be going to court and all that. Like, is you're trying to say, like, just we need people, period, or you're going to be dealing with this problem soon, and no one's going to believe them.
Yeah, but even I was thinking recruiting before the war too. Like, if you notice, most of them are, rapists and thieves, and then the only people that actually have any fighting skills going up are people that were raised in a castle, probably with these, valiant songs of the Night's Watch from hundreds of years ago. And then, like, all the small people pretty much know what it is, and that's when John finds out on the way up to the Wall that, even the small people know that this is a shithole, but the Highborns are, told these fantasy stories.
Yeah, but they had that guy in the Game of Thrones, the first chapter. Wasn't he described as like the third son of like?
He was like a Royce or something,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, what was his name? Why can't I remember that? But it was one of those things where when you're
Waymar.
so far, Waymar, yeah. If you're so far down the line, unless you're a Frey,
Right.
It's sort of like, okay, we've got an heir and a spare and another spare, and they've got kids and grandkids. So the rest of you, like, what are their prospects? Is to just kind of go fend for yourself, but also like Sam or somebody, they could get in the way, and you might want them out of the way. But I feel like the Watch has to be the last resort, because you could just be like, well, give me a little land and I'll be a farmer, and I'll be, I can be a lieutenant in the military, serving my house. Like, I don't know, there's got to be a better life.
Want to be famous, like Loras is so skilled that like he's able to be like third in line or whatever, but because of his skills, he can be part of the Kingsguard, either Renly's or Joffrey's. But like if you're a mediocre knight and you want to like make a name for yourself, like how do you do that? You're like going to the Wall is an option,
Or maybe if you
I guess especially if you're that far down south, you don't realize how bad the Wall is. Maybe you get filled with your head with stories.
Maybe if you're homosexual too, and you were like the third or fourth down the line of a lord, it might be a good option. A little adventure. You'd probably
surrounded
be able
by dudes.
Is that what you're thinking? Because you're like
Castle
the
Black
big
is like
boys
Fire
club.
Island.
No, but seriously, I mean, you'd
Castle Black
probably
is
be
Fire
able
Island.
to. You'd probably be able to slightly openly express your sexuality and have people turn, a blind eye.
You know what? This is the one thing that until this moment, I don't know if we've covered it, but I haven't really realized is that, so you always talk about them, going to Molestown digging for gold and all that, but like there's no hint of like, the Black brothers sometimes just cuddle for warmth, and I imagine that would be a very natural thing.
I think it's like a don't ask, don't tell situation, right?
Well, yeah, but you would think, I mean, maybe that's just George. Maybe it just didn't come to his mind, because it didn't really come to mine either. But, like, that's totally going on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think, if it were me, and your prospects are being a farmer, where you would still have to hide your nature, right? Society wouldn't accept it. Or you can go to certain brothels that cater to that, right, and pay money. Or you can go up to the Wall, have a position of some sort of honor in your life, a little adventure. You'd probably do okay because you've probably been trained by a hedge knight in combat, so you'd probably be able to be a ranger and not just work in a kitchen or some shit,
Right. And if you get caught, what are they going to do? Send you to the Wall?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I think it would be a viable option in that case, and even if you weren't a homosexual, it might be a decent life given the options, and especially if you did have like flowery tales of adventure and things,
I feel like if the Night's Watch had a thing where it's like, if you volunteer, you can join for 5 years or something. Like, if you could have like a non-lifetime commitment, they would have gotten a lot more people come
like
up there. Yeah, you get training and skills that you could use later. Maybe stay. You know, maybe you don't have any food. You could leave and then try to make your way in the world, possibly.
You know
But I
what?
think
That's
the
a
fact that
brilliant
it's
idea.
like you're living here no matter what, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Like, right. But I bet even that, like, the common folk would, as a common thing, would say, well, yeah, I'm going to send I can't feed him this winter. You know, we're having a hardship because we have so many kids. I'm going to send 2 of them up to the wall to train and live with them, you know, and then they'll come back men, sort of thing.
Yeah, it would
You
be
think
almost
that
like doing a tour in Army nowadays.
Yeah. Why is it a lifetime commitment? I mean, because it wasn't this forced service to start with. It was like an honorable group of men, like, up there, you know, knowing that there was a need. So why did they require this? Like, this is your life forever.
I think it was due to the circumstances, and they really needed to make this a commitment. That's why they can take no wives, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, they kind of say, like, why their order is so harsh. It's because it's for the ultimate good of Westeros. So I think that's why it's still a lifetime commitment. And then, because, you know, all these rules were made up within, like, living memory of the others invading Westeros.
Right. There's no option to leave. We don't want people to run away because, you know, they need to stand their ground when the others come.
And because it's a lifetime position, that's why, you know, robbers and thieves can have that option rather than whatever punishment, corporal punishment or imprisonment that they would face otherwise.
Right.
Because, you know, they're out forever. They're, you know, that's a life sentence for them at the watch.
I mean, I think it's also meant to represent a certain amount of, like, medieval clergy, shit like that, you know, where you would have lifetime servitude.
Yeah, and it probably didn't start with any criminals at all, right? It probably just, you know, I think what you're saying is right, is that it probably just grew that way because they were like, well, this could be an alternative.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, after the threat, you know, the actual threats of the whites weren't there, you know, they still need to guard that wall anyway from wildlings and whatever.
Well, I mean, that's their big issue right now, is that no one really remembers why, like, what their reason to do that is. Like, they could keep on saying, oh, it's a wildling invasion, and then people are like, okay, but really, you know, it's really fallen out.
You would think, though, that they would have more membership from people like, oh, yeah, we're going to starve to death, so we'll go up to the watch. Or, like, you know, what happens when you reach retirement age as you know.
Same thing that will happen to me when I reach retirement age. I'll keep on working.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? It's like, you think you could go up to the watch and, like, actually have a job there and stuff.
Well, I think a lot of times with the watch, they don't necessarily expect people to live up to retirement age, you know? Yeah. Most of them will probably die before that, either of disease, of the cold, or being killed.
They'll take the long walk.
Yeah. Yeah, you just walk yourself out into the snow and let yourself die.
That's what I'm saying. Like, as far as a decline, like 19 castles, and now only 3 of them are barely occupied. Like, what the hell? You would think that there would be
It's because there's just nothing's been going on.
Sanctuary.
Right. Well, in the time that those castles were built, I'd imagine that, you know, there was more valor of joining the Night's Watch. You know, you would go there because you're an amazing fighter and you're going to protect the realm. But over, you know, the last 1,000 years or however long it's been, you know, that idea has gone. Now it's just basically a prison, you know.
Oh, so now people just look at it as like, oh, if you're going up there, you must have done something wrong.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I think, like, with the highborn people, you know, they don't they hear the songs that the singers come to sing about the Night's Watch, whereas, like, you know, the lowborn people just see it as being a prison. You know, only bad people go there. Whereas we're hearing songs that were written 1,000 years ago about these amazing knights that go to the Night's Watch to defend the realm. Yeah. So, you know, the great fighters are going to be highborn people who were bamboozled into going there.
Yeah, if they're not taking it really seriously, the threat either, then they wouldn't. You know, the rest of the realm wouldn't initiate some sort of draft or something because they're not taking it that seriously.
Right. Yeah. And I think even with, like, Aemon, you know, he became a maester, and I think the only reason he really went to the wall was to get himself out of the line of succession. You know, I don't think that he really went there to be, you know, an amazing knight or to go there for any kind of chivalrous reason other than to get out of Dodge so he didn't have to be king.
Yeah, and he pretty much like says like my order is not to lead; it's to advise and give knowledge rather than So I don't think he's ever like looking for valor or wanted to be a knight. He was pretty happy with where he was.
Right, and I think he would have even, if there wasn't the whole issue of secession and him being in the line, I think that, he might have been happier living in a southern castle, being a maester to them, or even just staying in Old Town and, being an Arcalite or something like that. A high person at the Citadel.
Yeah, but I always got the impression that it had a lot more to do with court politics and saying, like, I am not an option, I'm out,
Yeah.
to make way for the others, and that was the main motivation as to why the Watch over anywhere else.
Yeah, and we're talking that was like 80 years ago that he decided to go to the Watch.
Right.
And it was still, it was still looked at as a prisoner, not a great place to be.
Let's circle back though. Let's say that he was the person who tipped Rhaegar off to the whole prince that was promised thing. Perhaps he, through his own studies, had gleaned that there was a need for him to be up there, that there was something he could learn up there, or he would be in a position, if you assumed that the prophecy was true, and even before these things started awakening back up in the world and they actually had evidence of White Walkers present.
They do have one of the best libraries.
I was going to say, maybe he knew that there were so many books up there that he had never read containing so much knowledge that might be vital to the prophecy. That's, maybe another motivation why he went up there.
Yeah.
And then the irony of him going blind.
Yeah, which is terrible.
Anyway, let's see. Yeah, I don't know. It's he at the very least he was happy for decades up there. I mean, I think he actually enjoyed his job and being part of the Watch. So
it'd be great.
It's a bittersweet ending.
Yeah,
it'd be great to have like a companion guide, like what Maester Aemon knew. You know what I mean? Like, I'd really
young
love
Maester Aemon going to Molestown and reading books.
It'd be great to get in his head and what does he know about Summerhall and all this shit?
Yeah. Well, someday we'll get that.
He even mentioned in this chapter about how all of his brothers had, dreams of waking the dragons. Every single one of them died because of it. So, I mean, he even knew, like, I would imagine that he knew what happened at Summerhall, given, that's where Egg died, and Egg was probably trying to resurrect dragons.
Doesn't he even say that to Jon in Game of Thrones when he's like, he was given hard decisions or hard news, like that he wanted to return to his family.
Yeah.
Like he got news of Summerhall. He got news of, the king's death and, Robert's rebellion and stuff like that. And then he has his big Targaryen reveal.
But he still stayed loyal to the Watch. Yeah. Yeah, I think that pretty well covers it, right, guys?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yep. So, let's see. Let's look ahead here. We have the next episode, which I think Bean is going to be hosting. And that's going to be Reek 2, Theon 2, Dance with Dragons. You get fake Arya at Moat Cailin, which is uncomfortable as shit. And then you get Quentin 2, and they're in Astapor, and more Brienne, where she is leaving Maidenpool. So, Brienne moves on to her next location. So that'll be great. Join us then, and thank you guys for joining us now.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks you, Adam.
Thank you, Max Headroom.
It's not that you're cutting out, Matt. It's like you're like grumpkins and snarks.
Yeah, it's like the remix. It's the Matt remix.
Yeah, it is. It's like you've got a DJ on you.
Yeah, I feel like we need like an air horn, like burr, 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 after you do that.
Westeros EDM style. So while Matt's gone, guys, how much do we hate him, right? Right?
I actually love it.
That
One of my
map. He's got a reboot. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, most of that I can cut out because it's like a sentence or two, and then like one word skips. It's annoying, but I can fix that. But if he's
Just
gonna
so
like
funny, it's
do a
like the
whole
more
monologue,
excited
it
Scott.
doesn't work.
Okay.
All right, Matt Headroom, everybody.
Oh no, did I go out again?
Yeah, you did a bit. Unfortunate.
Yeah, like I said, it's giving me vibes of Westworld.
You got to reset everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Just got to take in some of this natural splendor.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like anything to me.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, Matt, do you have any upcoming podcasts you want to pimp out while we're here?
Nope.
Didn't think so.
There's that Matt Hunter podcast.